of Vitalik explaining why what we're building with Bitcoin OS is so important. He basically lays out the problem, right? The problem is we've got this amazing platform with digital gold and the most decentralized ledger in the world, but it can't connect with anything. And so you end up giving up all of the trust assumptions for Bitcoin anytime you want to use Bitcoin. You need to use some kind of wrapped BTC, or you need to use some kind of centralized exchange. And then you ultimately end up getting rugged time and time again. And so the solution that Vitalik explains that we have to have is if we could just achieve the ability to have Bitcoin trustlessly connect to systems that can build DeFi, that can do trustless bridging, basically connect to external compute systems, then we could have our cake and eat it too. We can have Bitcoin as digital gold. We can have Bitcoin as the world's trustless, decentralized, reliable settlement layer and ledger. And we can use this digital gold and this ledger without having to make significant sacrifices around centralization or trust assumptions. To get there, Vitalik explains that we basically need to have Bitcoin plus a little bit more. And that little bit more has been the holy grail that we've been looking for well over a decade now in Bitcoin. That little bit more is the holy grail that Bitcoin OS provides, the operating system that allows Bitcoin to connect to other things. So, actually, this is not new from Vitalik. He's been thinking about this and talking about this for a while. And in that video, he mentions an article that he's written. This article came out in 2019, and it was called Base Layers and Functional Escape Velocity. This key concept of functional escape velocity I'll actually like to point out very, very quickly. Right, so he says here, blockchains should be maximally simple because they are a piece of infrastructure that is difficult to change, and in order to be reliable, so that it doesn't break, it shouldn't have too much complexity built on top of it. He then says, if you have a system like that, then you can get this really cool thing. You can get a kind of separation where all of the complexity happens in layer 2s, and layer 1 is for stability. Now, if you think about it, this sounds exactly like what we have with Bitcoin. In fact, it's in many ways the opposite of what we have with Ethereum, right? Ethereum is this maximally complex blockchain, whereas Bitcoin has managed to maintain itself as a pure play, super reliable, decentralized ledger. But for this idea to work, the layer 1 protocol has to have achieved a certain level of functionality, which he calls functional escape velocity. And this basically includes two primary ideas. One, that you're able to program, that you have the ability to have a programming language. And two, that you can have what he calls rich statefulness, or basically have the ability for this base reliable blockchain to have a sort of memory of the instructions it's been given through the programming language, right? So you basically need to be able to give it instructions, and for it to be able to have some memory of those instructions, so that instructions can be executed and instructions can be built on other instructions. So Bitcoin OS is exactly dealing with this problem. Instead of having the complexity on Bitcoin, what we've done is we've figured out how to give Bitcoin just that extra little bit of escape velocity. And we do this by allowing external computation system, basically any programming language, to write arbitrarily complex smart contracts, compress those smart contracts, fold them down into a ZK proof, and then this is where the magic happens. We can take that ZK proof, we can write it to Bitcoin, we can verify that ZK proof on Bitcoin, we can verify the entire compute as a result on Bitcoin, and we can execute that on Bitcoin. And so this gives you those two key components that are required to give Bitcoin that little extra of what is required to achieve functional escape velocity. It's one, the ability to provide instructions through these programmable layers. And two, through these ZK proofs, also being able to provide a memory through recursion of each other, we also provide the system with this kind of memory. And so you can now have Bitcoin trustlessly connecting to other systems. And those systems can be applications built on Bitcoin, they can be rollups built on Bitcoin, and they can even be other chains like Layer 1s, like Ethereum, like Solana, like Cardano. This is a very, very exciting moment for Bitcoin, precisely because this is the moment that Bitcoin achieves functional escape velocity and allows us to basically take all of the other systems which are designed for compute, other Layer 1s, other rollups, and turn them into L2s for Bitcoin. So that Bitcoin becomes what it always was meant to be, this central hub of value, the central hub of the Internet of Value, the central ledger, and the central settlement layer for all of this type of transactional activity. So to describe just a little bit more how this kind of works, we are now able to, with these ZK proofs, basically lock Bitcoin or lock other kinds of assets which can be created through programmable tokens on the Bitcoin ledger, and have those tokens or those Bitcoins locked in what we call a ZK vault. The ZK vault is like a smart contract, but instead of writing all of the complex instructions into the smart contract on chain, all of the complexity is written in other external environments. And through these ZK proofs, we can provide those Bitcoin smart contracts, these ZK vaults, any type of instruction that a programmer might choose, or a developer might choose, or a builder might choose to build into Bitcoin. So, the reason I think Vitalik's talking about this now, and the reason people are getting so excited, is because we are in an entirely new era for Bitcoin, for crypto, for finance, for computing. An era of verifiable compute on Bitcoin, an era where everything can be a layer 2 for Bitcoin, an era of building an operating system on Bitcoin.